The Power Factor Show. Episode 96.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Brought to you by Safariland and Hodgdon, the gunpowder people.
Yeah, so welcome back to Power Factor. I'm Steve.
Rick.
So today we're going to continue with my East Coast tour. So this next thing really impressed me. After every one of these frames come off of CNC, they are gauged and checked. And they are gauged, the pinholes are all checked. They're using go, no-go gauges on a lot of the stuff. Every pinhole is referenced to the slide stop on a Colt. They go through and use this instrument to check the different various points on the frame, and if it passes, it goes on. If it doesn't, it's rejected and tossed out. During a later point here during the tour, they took me through, or by, I should say, actually in, was effectively their calibration division at Colt, where they make sure all of their instruments are within spec. Colt is what's called NIST traceable. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and traceable basically means that these instruments or whatever, whether it's a caliper or in this case here, let's say it's a computer-controlled gauge, needs to be verified or tested or checked. They'll go into this, they'll have like a cal cycle or whatever. They'll go into the cal department and make sure that these things are accurate within a certain specification. And that specification or accuracy goes back to NIST. So they'll probably have like a golden, and I'm going to throw this out hypothetically, like a golden bar that is exactly 1 inch, 1.00000 inches or something like that. Mm-hmm. That NIST certifies that it is this size, and then they can then take their measuring instruments and put it up against that and verify that it measures exactly the same thing that NIST does. And that was really pretty cool, because again, that's something that my company does, but more from the electrical standpoint. The guy who runs, the great old guy, his name is Brett, I believe, who runs that department, and he and I ended up having a chat for quite a while, in fact. And I can't mention specifically what he asked me, but he asked me if I had a chance to test fire a certain firearm that Colt manufactures. Which I can't say, but unfortunately, no, I haven't, because we just didn't have enough time to do it. So this area here, these machines, and there's 4 of them, date back to the 30s, and they literally are the machines that go in on a Colt 1911, where these trigger tunnel is in the frame. It goes in there and it shaves basically metal out to make the tunnel, and there's 4 of them. There's 4 steps basically: the first shave, a second shave, a final shave, and then a polish that go through. And this is one of the frames here, basically in a jig, and that machine, the assembly moves in and out to cut the spring tunnel. It's just really interesting to see some really old machines being used that way. If you look at these, at the end of these, there's usually what used to be at this point the belt system that would have gone up to the main shaft that would have run through the factory that ran these things way back in the day.
So even though they're electric now, they still have the vestiges of when they were run by the belts.
Right. So here's the next step. Again, more polishing. Again, there's 4 different steps that are being done here. I think this is the final step here in the whole entire process that you see you got here working in this one. Next part of the company was where the polishing is being done. The slides are put on a big belt, and they go under these, what looks to be 5 different machines, and they go through and literally polish the flats on the side of the slides. And I presume they probably would also run the frames through here too, but they go down on one belt, come back up on the other. This machine is in the same area where they do all the hand polishing. This is more of a close-up picture here of one of these things. There's a big, you can't really see here, but a big disc, and when a slide would go through here, you'd see literally sparks in some cases come flying out the other side, which is kind of interesting. I wanted to get a picture of it when sparks were flying, but unfortunately I couldn't get the timing right. This is, again, there's a lot of hand operation here. There's an individual literally polishing a frame here. As I was told by RJ, is that working or getting a job in the polishing department is one of the most sought after positions in the company, mainly because these guys are the final authority on everything that moves outside or moves on to the next step, and they literally see everything, and if it doesn't pass, their qualifications, then it doesn't go any further, and in fact they are allowed to work as long and as much as necessary on a frame or on a slide to get it to their standards. And everything is polished here. So at this point here, again, he's polishing, you can't really see it, but he's polishing inside the trailer guard of the 1911. Next picture is a individual polishing the plunger tube assembly on a big polishing wheel. Next picture is, and this is a hammer for obviously 1911, really nicely highly polished. And this next picture is a bunch of barrels. Again, they're polishing everything here. So the barrels are all being polished. Here's a picture of an individual polishing a barrel. So again, you can see here a lot of hand operation of everything. And this sign here kind of says it all. They really, really value the job of the polisher and respect that here within Colt. And again, like I said, it's really a sought after position here within the company. This next picture is a very highly polished single action army. Yeah, I saw that, and just the bling off that thing was just amazing. And I believe this was a customer gun that was sent in for refinishing, and they do that. I mean, the custom shop will get in different firearms, and the polishing is all being done by this particular group here in the company. So they had pythons that were also being done. It was right next to this was a python. I didn't want to shoot a picture of it because you could actually see the serial number on it. I didn't want to reveal that.
So that's in like a restoration then of
Yeah.
an existing gun as opposed
Yeah,
to a new gun.
exactly. So I mentioned before that Colt does all their own forging. These are a bunch of forged side stops that are then going to be machined. And that's the next group of pictures here you're going to see is a lot of the small parts, we're going to call it here, within Colt. So here are being machined. These are a bunch of barrels, obviously. Next picture is where they proof test each of the barrels. So what happens is that after they go and basically build a barrel, they fire a proof round through it, which is a very overpressured round, and they proof test the barrel. And then after that, they magnaflux the barrel, and every barrel, not just like 1 out of every 20 or whatever, every barrel gets proof tested, every barrel gets magnafluxed, and only certain individuals at Colt are certified to do magnafluxing. So it's not just like, hey Joe, you go check the barrels out. I mean, you need to know what you're doing. You need to be certified to be able to do it. It's not, when the person who does magnafluxing isn't there, nothing moves forward out of this area. And every barrel has that done. This is the broach that is the broach cutting of the rifling on the 1911 barrels. And this next assembly is where it's actually being done, where the broach cutting the barrels. And then the next picture is of this barrel is literally pulled right up the assembly after being cut, and you can see the rifling through that. And just to give you an idea of how strong Colt barrels are, I got a picture of it, but it didn't turn out very well. There's an X-ray of a Colt Python that was sent back in that had 9 bullets in the barrel, protruding out the forcing cone and into the cylinder. So whoever owned it obviously fired 6, decided that wasn't enough, reloaded 6 more, continued shooting until the thing stopped, and then wondered why.
I've actually seen somebody do that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a nice X-ray that they have there, and you can see them, 9 individual bullets in the barrel that are stuck there. And I asked them how they fixed it. I think they said they literally unscrewed the barrel to get at least that part out of the way, and then had to deal with the bullet in the forcing cone. And
yeah, because you couldn't get the cylinder open, right?
Nope, you can't do much of anything. Yeah. So one of the things that also Colt is known for, which I really appreciate, is roll marking. I really like roll marking on a firearm, and I think that's one of the things that Colt prides themselves in being one of the few that does the roll marking versus either the dot matrix or laser etching or laser engraving of metal. But these are all roll marked, and you can see here all the different dies.
Oh, I was going to ask what those things are.
Yeah,
so those are the roll marks all stacked up there?
All the roll marks stacked up. And there's another picture here again of more of them. Actually same group, but all the roll marks. And then the next picture here is the assembly where they go and actually do the roll marking. So unfortunately I don't see it here, but my guess is they put the die on something and then roll it obviously across the slide to do the roll mark on the slide. So again, Colt does all of their own small parts, and this is just a big, bunch of bins of different, you can see hammers, you can see slide stops, you can see ejectors, bushings, which we'll get to that in a little bit, sears, everything. You got commander hammers, you got full-size hammers, you have the different short ejectors and extended ejectors, everything. And they are all manufactured out of tool steel or out of forgings here by Colt. This is an individual, literally hand filing an ejector. So again, all the ejectors and the ejectors are made out of tool steel. They're not spring steel. I asked them about that because I know you were
Extractors.
Extractors.
Right.
Extractors are made out of tool steel, which you'll see some here in their raw form. But again, he's doing hand filing and probably removing burrs after the machining process. So here's another picture here, again, of the same extractor. But like I said before, a lot of hand fitting of everything. This is another one of the old machines that are being used to build or create extractors or the other various parts. And this is kind of interesting. This literally is the beginning and end to extractors. In the bottom bin, you have just this basically tool steel, what looks just like chunks of cut rod, so to speak. The beginning, say, of an extractor, and then they go through and are machined and then become extractors after different various operations. Again here, really old machines being used to create these. You can see a row of extractors down here at the bottom and in the bin, the finished product after different machining operations. And this is a very old and well-used mallet. I just saw that thing, and it's just like, that thing is just completely deformed, and I don't know how many years are on that thing, but...
Is it lead?
I don't know. It looks like it could be.
I've seen lead mallets where when the thing gets all beat up, included with the mallet is a mold. Okay. And you just remold a new head onto it.
Really?
And melt it down and make a new hammer when it gets so deformed that you can't use it anymore.
Well, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, my guess is it must be lead. Or
you
something
whack on something steel.
Yeah, right. But I saw that and it's like, wow, that's unique. So this is a machine that cuts barrel bushings, and I got two pictures here of basically the machine in operation, and then the before picture. We all know what a barrel bushing looks like when it pops out.
Is that sparks and smoke and stuff coming out?
That's sparks and smoke and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, real machine.
Cutting some metal there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I've always wondered how barrel bushings were made, and it was really kind of cool to see. You can see more smoke here in this next picture, and more sparks and stuff, and dumping all sorts of oil all over it. But this next picture here shows how barrel bushings start out. It's just, the bottom part you can recognize, but the top part's just a round disc, and they go through there, and it's just, the machine goes through and cuts the outer dimension of the front of the barrel bushing out. Next picture here is creating hammers. These are what appear to be commander hammers, or on the different, I know some of the newer models or whatever have the skeletonized hammers, but these are definitely skeletonized hammers.
Right.
And this is the custom shop. Yeah. So now we enter the custom shop. Colt manufactures a Gatling gun, and this Gatling gun was owned or is owned by a customer that was sent in to have engraving done to I don't know if you want to call it a barrel shroud or something to that effect, but at any rate.
And that's the pattern, they're going to put the dome on there?
That's the pattern, they're going to put the dome on there.
That's cool.
So I thought that was really interesting. As I recall, they said the whole entire gun is brass except for the barrels, which are obviously steel. But at any rate, I just thought when I walked in there and saw that, it's like, wow. And Colt, yes, they do manufacture this. And care to guess what the price is?
Something on the far side of $10,000, maybe on the far side of $20,000.
Keep going.
$30,000.
More. It's $50,000.
Dang.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're going to make $50,000
$50,000 and you can have your own Gatling gun, yeah.
Right.
And
I'll trade my house for it.
For a few $1,000s more, you can have the dome engraved on it.
Yeah,
But
that's cool.
it will be unique, and you can definitely say that you're probably the only one who has one of them. So this is a top-down picture of the same Gatling gun with the plate on top and different patent dates and whatnot. But I was just, when I saw this thing in there and just the bling coming off that, it was very, very amazing.
Now, what is it, a 4570?
4570.
Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that's cool.
In fact, Brent runs the custom shop, and I think you've actually had conversations with him on the 1911 forum.
Yeah, he's like Colt's guy on the 1911 forum. So
Yeah.
anytime anybody, and he does an amazing job on the forum, because somebody will say, oh, this, I got my gun and I don't like this thing about it, and Brent will come into the thread, uninvited, and say, hey, contact me, I'll send you a tag, we'll get the gun in. And so, customer service, not just on the phone, but he's really become invaluable for the Colt people on the forum.
Yeah, it's funny because I think RJ was mentioning that again, we're talking about the average ages of the employees there, and I think he said that one of the guys in the custom shop, and it might be Brent, but at any rate, was saying he's like the youngest kid on the block there, and the guy's got like 30 years of service with Colt or something like that, and I believe it. You look at the work that's being done here. Also, I think the custom shop has to probably be one of the best jobs you can get, because it's like every day is potentially Christmas, because they have customers sending guns in, and probably 90% of the time it's like, oh, it's another one of those or whatever, but every once in a while you get some really unique guns come in, and we'll see something here very shortly of what we're talking about unique. This was a gun that was being created, I'll use that, for a customer who was with the Texas Rangers, who was also in the Marines. So this is 24 karat gold inlay that's being put into the back strap of a single action Army.
Yeah.
And then the front strap, which is already done, was the individual's name that was done with 24 karat gold inlay. Wow. I asked the guy who was doing this how many days of work he had into this, and he says he got about 4 right now at this point. And I said, how much do you have remaining? He said, probably about 2 or 3 more to go. Wow. Just to do that part. So I don't know how much engraving or what is going to go beyond this, but that's definitely one special gun being created there. Another picture here, kind of a more distant view of it, so you can see what the insignia was that he was putting into it. And just all the various tools here, and obviously the little tin there of 24 karat gold. And so like I say, you better guard over that, because at $1,700 an ounce or whatever it is these days, it's like any small filings or whatever you can. Mm-hmm. This is really a special gun. This is a 175th anniversary commemorative single action Army, fully engraved, gold inlay, ivory grips, scrimshaw, everything, valued at $150,000. One off, no other like it. Yeah. WOW pretty much describes that. That's really an interesting single action Army, and I mentioned before that I really like the old single action Armies, and whenever I see them, I just kind of like start drooling. But when I saw this, it's like, I wanted to touch it, but on the other hand, I didn't want to touch it.
Yeah, pretty good point at it.
Yeah. So cool. That was a very cool revolver. They have a lot of other really cool guns that they have in there. This is a 1911, obviously, with a lot of full engraving on it. Again, royal blue, ivory grips.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. They can send us one of each.
Yeah. Right. Display case they have here of the different firearms that they have there, just examples of what the custom shop has done. So obviously you see a lot of guns in here that look like, standard production type guns, but they are actually special.
Like sights and trigger jobs and stuff, or
just, sights and trigger jobs.
I mean, not just
special
cosmetics, but they have functional improvements too.
Or ones that are built up from the ground with increased tolerances and stuff like that. Just, attention to detail type stuff, building a gun from the ground up with tighter than normal tolerances, and then they machine it down to the point where it has zero or near zero tolerance. Okay, this one. Yeah. So I have to be careful about how we go about describing this. This gun was sent into the custom shop. It dates back to 1911, the year 1911. It apparently, as a lot of the cases, a lot of these guns that were run through, because this is military property, that the people usually decide to file off the military property insignias. And it had been refinished, and it was a very bad hatchet job apparently in refinishing, so they lost a lot of the roll marks. They lost a lot of the lines. What should be sharp lines were now roll off and things of that nature. And it was nickeled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Sent into the custom shop. All I will say about this gun is that the serial number is in the very, 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 very low 3-digit range.
Wow.
And it is owned by a very high-level person at Colt.
It's nice. Yeah. So they have to re-engrave all the markings.
They were able to basically recover the lines and re-engrave, recover the roll marks effectively. I don't know if that was done by hand. I would venture to guess it was probably not a roll mark that they had there. It was probably all done by hand to recover all that.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and hopefully I haven't said too much already, but at any rate,
it's kind of shiny.
It is very shiny. This is the Colt Royal Blue.
Now, they kept that around as a sample?
No,
or something,
this is
or
going
they just
back.
happened to be there.
No, they're working on it.
Okay,
yeah, they were.
cool.
I mean, it's about ready to go back to the owner. So moving out here, this is to the final assembly area. So all the parts come together, frames and slides, and all the individual parts are put into them to create the final product. And they are then stamped by the assembler at this point. So there are 3 stampings on a frame on a 1911. You have the assembler's mark, a verified proof mark, and then the final inspector mark. So after they assemble these, they stamp it as an assembler, and then it goes off to the test range. And at the test range, they fire 5 rounds of the gun. 2 of them are fired for accuracy, and 3 of them are fired for repeatability. Every single gun is fired at the test range here, and they are verified for accuracy. Now, a lot of companies that are out there that make 1911s don't have the ability to actually test fire guns for accuracy. And if they're not accurate at this point, they have the sight drifters and everything to get them on target. But a lot of companies just produce 1911s, fire them into a bucket or a bullet trap or whatever, and if it runs, they're considered good. And then the customer gets to be the one to figure out whether it's on target or not. And if it's not, then either they deal with it or they have to send it back to the manufacturer at either their expense to get the gun fixed. Well, Colt does it all here before it even reaches the customer. So they test fire the guns, and they are the ones who actually stamp the verified proof mark on the frame. The next group of photos here are kind of interesting. The test range is actually General Key's playground, so to speak. So when he brings individuals in for a factory tour or whatever, it's like, hey, let's go down to the test range or whatever. What do you want to shoot?
Right.
So here's a bunch of what appears to be, I think, an anaconda.
Right.
You've got pythons, what appears to maybe be a king cobra, 1911s.
Right.
And then the next picture here is a bunch of very, very old guns. A lot of them no longer manufactured. So you got double eagles.
Right.
I think there's a Delta Elite in here that's obviously still being manufactured.
The old 22.
Yeah, I think it's a Cadet.
They called it the Cadet for a while, but then they ended up just calling it something like the 22 Target.
Okay.
Do they have the All-American 2000 on there?
I looked up there and I didn't see it.
I
don't see the All-American 2000.
What is that?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
I think it's basically just either
it looks almost like doesn't look like even like a Colt that I'm aware of.
Well, I think it's we're looking at here a picture, but I think it's either kind of like an angled view of the officers or something
Where's
like
the
that.
hammer? There's no beaver tail.
Well, that's
on it.
true. Yeah.
Maybe that's some kind of weird.
Maybe it's a one-off prototype that they did.
Yeah, interesting though.
Yeah, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, this is General Key's playground, so
Right, that's
yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So next picture here is a bunch of the single action armies lined up for inspection. Now I mentioned before when we saw that cylinder of single action armies that were in the bluing area. At this point, the guns have cylinders that are in the white. And the reason they do this is that they test fire the guns, which we saw, and then they inspect them, and then they pull the cylinders out, do the final basically clean up, polish, whatever on them, and then send them off to bluing, bring them back, reinstall it, and verify it.
And then don't they put like a zip tie around it so that you don't, after it's finished and fitted, nobody cocks the hammer prior to the owner taking possession of it?
I don't know, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, I've seen a lot of Colts,
yeah,
and they say
yeah.
like what they're quote used, but they'll say unturned, meaning
Right,
you know that
right.
the cylinder hasn't moved since they got the gun.
So the reason for doing this obviously is that when you test fire the gun, you're going to get powder burn or whatever in the front of the cylinder. They don't want that on any of the, you know, after they go off and blew it, then you've got powder burn on there. So they
Right.
basically, you know, test fire it, clean out the powder burn, refinish, and then ship it. So this literally is the final step. They said at this point it becomes in the system.
Recorded serial numbers.
Recorded serial numbers,
Right.
boxed, and it goes off to their warehouse. But this is literally the last step in the process. And in case of my tour, this was the last step in our. Oops, I'm sorry. Next picture here is actually the inspector's mark into the single action army revolver that was being built. And well, last picture here, I guess. I think it's been saying last, and I believe it's next to last, but it's probably last. But anyway, this is just a bunch of. I think they were actually making a lot of. I think it's a new agent model when I was going through. And that's the last one. That's the last one of the commercial side. And at this point, I went off and did my tour of the defense side. And unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk about anything that I saw on the defense side. However, what I can tell you is that in terms of rifles, all of the commercial rifles and all the defense rifles are built in or on the same line. They don't differentiate between you know, the defense rifles doing any extra special testing or gauging or anything like that versus the commercial rifles. So they all do the same testing, the same inspection, the same everything on all of them.
Now, do they still differentiate? Like, I have an older Colt pre-ban. Commercial guns had different pin sizes and some things to prevent you from converting an AR to an M16. Are they still differentiating between using different parts for the commercial guns?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly, in terms of pin sizes, I don't know if they still have, and my guess is they probably do, the large pin versus small pin.
Right.
And what this gets down to is on the the upper to the lower pin.
Right. The cross pin that holds the upper to the
and
lower.
Colt has always been known to use, I think, small pins. And my guess is that even on the military guns are using the small pins still.
Yeah, but the guns that are intended for commercial sales do have some minor mechanical differences like they used to.
Yeah, I think there's the block.
Yeah, the sear block.
The sear block,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And my guess is that's probably the only real difference in terms of the lower that you would see between the two.
Right. But it's not like the ones with the sear block go down this production line.
No. I saw a combination. In fact, it was very difficult to tell. It's like these ones are law enforcement, these ones are military, these ones are commercial, and they can obviously tell what they are based on the different fore ends and this, that, and anything in the configuration. But they were all together.
That's cool.
So, but what I can say is that Colt has some very, very high-tech processes going on. And I think that's one of the reasons why they did not want to allow me to do any photography or even discuss it, because from their standpoint it's proprietary information. And they don't want that information getting out to their competitors so that they would get effectively an unfair advantage on Colt. But I was really impressed with what they were doing, the amount of testing, the types of devices they had for doing testing was just utterly amazing.
And that's your business, right? I mean, you personally, you work for a company that makes stuff for testing stuff,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And so that would, if you might be hard to impress than the average person.
Yeah. I mean, most people would walk in there and go, wow, but a lot of the testing stuff, I know what goes into testing, and just the technology that they were employing. And I mean, to say that I was amazed would be an understatement. I was more than amazed, and I wish I could talk about it, but unfortunately I can't.
So then we'd have to count.
Yeah, right. So we'll have to leave it at that. But if you could see what I saw, I think you would have a very understanding level of respect for what's going on there. So, so with that, I'd like to thank Colt for at least allowing me this opportunity of going through the factory. I also want to thank David Galante for setting this up. Now, I mentioned before about what David had to go through. This had to be cleared, from what I understand, by General Keyes himself. It had to be cleared by the head of the production division, the head of the commercial division. It had to be cleared by the head of the defense division. The defense division basically said, we don't care what you guys in commercial do, but when he's in the defense side, he can't do this, right. Which I thought was pretty funny, and that's understandable. But this wasn't just like I said, your normal tour. Normally when Colt does tours, it's a group of people. This is a one-off. I mean, I really got special treatment of going through. And I really appreciate that what David went through, but also what Colt went through to make this happen. I also want to thank all the employees there that I met. A lot of them would stop, take the time to explain what they were doing, let me take pictures, answer any questions I had, which I really appreciate. And I think you guys who work at Colt should really be proud of who you're working for and what you're doing there. Because I don't think a lot of people can actually say that they work for a company who is really cornerstone in the foundation of this country. I mean, Colt, there's a lot of history, and Colt is part of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I don't think they can say that.
Well, the other thing too, not to get too far up the field from your tour, but just in terms of firearms production, Colt not only make the guns that are famous as Colt guns, like single action armies in 1911s. But they made Browning automatic rifles, right. Gatling guns, Tommy guns,
yeah.
And so a lot of important guns that even we don't generally associate with Colt. Colt was making them, this very significant firearms in American history that we don't even associate with Colt. They've been making them right along.
Yeah. And I'll also say that that when you go into work at Colt, I wouldn't. Don't think that you're just making firearms, you're making Colts, and that means a lot to a lot of people that are in the know. I mean, the people who really respect and understand what Colt is all about. Colt's been known for making quality firearms for, many generations now. And one thing I was going to mention is that when I was in the Gettysburg Museum, they had a lot of different representations of different rifles and handguns during that period. And the one thing that I noticed every time is that you look at the Colts compared to everything else that's there, and the finish on them, just a level of detail was, it was noticeable. The other stuff looked rough. The Colt stuff looked finished. Even back then, just the attention to detail of what they were doing was obvious. And I think that still, even more so today, what I'm seeing is that the just constant gauging and verification and testing that you're seeing at all levels was just amazing. And yes, you can. If you were in the market for 1911, and you can go out and buy one, and you can go out and pay, you're going to pay more for a Colt than you would if you went and bought somebody else's gun. But I think a lot of that is because you look at the amount of handwork that's going into it, but if you also look at the quality of the parts. Colt is using forgings, they're using tool steel, where other people are using MIM. And I think that's just an understanding from their part of saying, we are going to put quality parts in this gun. You may not understand the significance of that, but we do, and it's the idea of giving the customer, I think, a little more than they expect. It's something that's what drives Colt. That's what makes Colt a Colt. And I got to say that, and I'm not, just blowing steam here or whatever, but if I was in the market for a 1911 or an AR today, I would, without a doubt, I would pick a Colt just from what I've seen. It just head and shoulders above everything else, just from what I've seen through this tour. So I hope you enjoyed the tour. Hope you learned something out of all that. I know I definitely did. And again, is a one-off experience for me, and I really appreciate it. Next year, I might be actually I am going to Italy. Whether I can somehow wrangle a tour of Beretta would be pretty cool, but kind of always held Bretta and Colt in the same category. They're both really old companies, except Bretta's like 500 years old, or nearly.
Supposedly they're like the oldest company in the world.
Oldest, yeah, I've heard before, the oldest manufacturing company in the world. So,
yeah.
Not to get too far afield here, but my shotgun is back at Bretta right now, getting work done to it. So,
Improvements, customization.
No, just work, and depending on what happens here, I'll talk about that later in a future episode. So I think we need a new trivia question.
Yes, we've got another hat and mug and shirt to give away, and this week's question is based on this week's episode. If you've been watching, Steve made mention of having seen Colonel Colt's grand house above the factory, and the trivia question is, what was the name of the house that the Colts built on the hill above the factory? So send your answers in, and we'll do our new prize format. If you get the correct answer in the first week, your name will go on a hat, and we'll pick a winner.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks for viewing.
Again, if you have any questions or comments,
don't leave Facebook for me.
Yeah.
Send an email.
So facebook.com/powerfactorshow, and the other ones are to you.
powerfactorshow@gmail.com and powerfactorshow.com.
And thanks again, Colt, and thanks again, David. We do appreciate it.
See ya.
See ya.